Hello and welcome to the Genuine Learning Blog. My name is Melisa Galasso, and today we're going to look at FASB's post-implementation review of leases. As with all standards, they have a post-implementation review process, which basically evaluates whether the standard achieves its objectives, and they go through the cost-benefit analysis, which is just a quality control mechanism to make sure that they learn from the issuance of standards, what worked, what didn't work, and again, looks at the effectiveness of standard setting. So in November of 2025, they did this. They issued their post-implementation review. Obviously, ASU 2016-02 is now fully implemented, and so we're able to take a look at the impact and obviously all the related, additional ASUs that came out following it. And again, it looks at the cost benefit. What is the impact of the standard? And so going through this, they wanted to determine whether the lease standard was accomplishing its stated purpose. Like, why did we start with it anyway? And did it do what it was supposed to do? Determine whether the lease standard is accomplishing and evaluating the implementation and continued compliance costs, right? So when we think about the cost benefit analysis, what was the implementation cost, right? There's always a little bit more in year one, but the continuing compliance, and then obviously the benefits to the user. And then again, to provide feedback to improve the standard setting process. Is there any lessons learned that they needed to do? And so again, they engaged with over 1,600 individuals that had these diverse backgrounds in over 280 stakeholder meetings, 77 advisory groups. They prepared 70 documents, including memos, exposure drafts, and ASUs. Responded to 370 questions through their technical inquiry service, and had over 30 board meetings on implementation, subsequent standard setting, and those PIR updates. So I always love when they give some nice background. But why did we do this standard? Well, it dates back to 2005, right? A little bit of this post-Enron consideration, looking at these off-balance sheet implications. So we started a joint project with the IASB for IFRS purposes, and they did a discussion paper, then 2 rounds of exposure draft, one kind of joint, and then we issued our topic 842 leases in 2016. But as you can see, they've made some changes over the time. They issued additional documents. They had to delay the standard. And then from the implementation of that standard, they obviously then took a look at what were some of the post-implementation. They did those round tables as part of that. So public and private entities now have implemented. So what did they find? Well, at the end of the day, they do feel like it provides more decision useful information in the financial statements, mostly because of the disclosure requirements, right? The Leases standard topic 842 has significant requirements around providing qualitative and quantitative disclosures. And so users have been very positive around that. It obviously addressed the request from the SEC because the SEC wanted to look at these off-balance sheet arrangements and the implications as a result of Enron. And so they wanted to obviously address that. And many lessees found that as part of this, they better understood their leases and their internal controls and their procurement, right? When you had to kind of get a totality of your leases, it required really talking to the procurement people about, not just something that says a lease, right? So there's a lot more around internal control there. Investors, again, generally found that the lessor information was sufficient. And lessors found that because it was tied to RevRec and not significantly different than the previous standard, right, that they felt that it was working well. Where we had most of the sort of cost was in the original implementation. Most lessees did incur significant costs because either the systems or the processes in there. So not only was it an implementation, but in subsequent, years, it didn't go away, right? So they had to invest in lease software. They had to really rethink their documentation, right? And some of their considerations, moving to that more principles-based approach around things like lease term. As part of that, many entities did comprehensively review all of their contracts. And I don't think that was really initially thought of. But in order to be able to come up with completeness of the population, because again, you could have embedded leases and things that we maybe didn't consider under the topic 840 guidance, right? That required a lot of going through the existing, not just new. As a result, contract management, right, how we make purchases, the make versus buy decision, having accounting being involved anytime something could be a lease, right, was a change in systems. Obviously, needing significant implementation support was, a key consideration there. However, lessors came back and said it wasn't as bad because, again, it was really similar to Topic 840. In terms of the benefits, right, investors said, it was kind of mixed on whether having the assets and liabilities on the books made a difference. It was the disclosures that really appealed to them. They found that that was really helpful. Practitioners and preparers found that at least certain types of guidance around modification accounting or sale leaseback were improvements to the underlying GAAP. In addition, again, that enhanced internal control and understanding their processes, I think that is something that people, got out of it sort of as a byproduct, not probably the original intent. So again, generally, investors were happy. But there were significant costs, right? The implementation and ongoing, right? It's not like you just pay for that software once. It's an ongoing cost for software as part of that. And again, there was a significant gap between the assertions received before the issuance and what they needed to actually do regarding systems once 842 was issued and implemented. So again, needing to have additional additional support, not just in implementation, but on an ongoing basis, right? Going through that comprehensive review process. And then those internal control considerations, again, lessors not having as much impact. Where did they have the most impact? Discount rate, right? Having to really make that evaluation, recognition and measurement, related party leases, which again, we had multiple additional ASUs in that area, lease modification accounting, identification of what is a lease, including those embedded leases, that going through the process of evaluating all of your existing contracts that could potentially have a lease in them, sale leaseback accounting, and then allocating between lease and non-lease components, right? Your maintenance and other things that could be included in there. So overall, in terms of feedback, stakeholders, very costly, but some benefits in there. Investors said, again, having those disclosures was really helpful, but the cost was something that everybody kind of noted as an unexpected and the continual cost of it. And then again, those additional resources were very costly. So overall, the conclusion was it met its objective, right? It responded to the SEC staff request to look at putting these rights and obligations on the balance sheet. Again, while there were implementation challenges, at the end of the day, everybody feels like they did get the leases on the books. And again, that was consistent with what was expected. For lessees, the costs were not consistent with what was expected. Again, that ongoing cost. And so that's something that they're going to continue to monitor. And then again, opportunities to improve the standard setting process, looking at things like system and process assumptions are going to be considered. So again, this is not just a historic, but what can we do going forward? That's the point of a PIR. Next time we have something like this, what do we need to keep in mind? So for those of you who have been implementing or finished implementing the Leases standard, right, you had this opportunity to sort of see what the FASB thought. Obviously, if you have any upcoming staff level training needs, we would love to assist you with that. But thank you guys so much for joining me, and I hope to see you on a future vlog. Have a great day, guys. Bye-bye.